So I am 31 years old, and I have just gotten out of prison. Just a few days over 3 months. However, when I was 16 years old, they told me that I'd spend the rest of my life in prison. And it was 15 years that I had to serve, fighting every single day to remain sane, to be heard, and fighting for my freedom. And here I am. You know, God rescued me. He completely turned my situation around, and I am literally a miracle sitting before you today.
Here at Clark Atlanta University, talking about serving justice, we had Miss Cyntoia Brown talking about her life before, during, and after serving her time in prison, 15 years at that. She gave us a snippet of her life in her new book, Free Cyntoia. Make sure you get a copy of that. It's only $20. You are here with your favorite fly girl, Brianna Monee, with Jay Visuals behind the camera.
Yes, indeed. And I think one could probably go as far as saying that life sentence actually gave you a lifeline. Because, some people go and they do the time and that's it. But here you are, here telling your story with an emotionally penned book that has and I don't want to spoil too much about the book, but there's so many juicy aspects about your life. So for those who don't know the long version of the story, when you were 16, you was in these streets wilding.
Right.
For lack of a better term, right?
Right.
And what would you say was the turning point that, put you down a different path than most girls your age were going down at that time?
You know, in the book, I trace it back very early to feeling, when I was young and in elementary school, feeling like I didn't belong because I was different. I was different from my parents because I was adopted, because I was mixed. I was different from my church members. I kept seeing a lens of how I didn't fit, and I just wanted to belong. And that continued on well into my teen years. The school enforced that. The rest of us who didn't have any charges were well on our way, and within 6 months, I had got my first charge at the age of 12. And being in facilities is a whole different beast. So I experienced facility life at a very young age, and I would definitely say that was a starting point when things just took a downturn for me.
So, even going down that road, now when you talk about being bullied and just feel like, you didn't belong, you was an outcast, we a lot of times talk about racism, at the hands of other people, but sometimes, some of the most severe racism comes from ourselves, and you being light-skinned, I would imagine you probably got it just as bad from, some of our darker-skinned brothers and sisters than you did from the white people, I'd imagine, right?
Yeah, so being mixed, I didn't understand what it meant to be mixed. I didn't even know that I was mixed when I first started school. One of my classmates had pointed out to me that I didn't match my parents, who were both dark-skinned. And that, of course, opened up a whole can of worms. And I can remember telling them what my mother had told me, that I was mixed. I was black and white, and that wasn't acceptable. I was too white to be black, and I was too black to be white. And it was like, well, where do I fit? I'm just who I am. I can't help who I am. I don't get to check just one box for my ethnicity. And what community do I belong to if not the one that I've been raised in?
Okay, so when you get in trouble at the age of 12, because most of us, if we get in trouble at the age of 12, we get sent to our room. But you ended up in a facility? What did you do?
So I ended up in a facility, and I want to backtrack to the whole point that I was actually in alternative school was a bottle of no-dose pills. So when I think about me being in facilities, I think back to that bottle of caffeine pills. You can buy it just as readily as you can buy Tylenol or Dimetab. But because my middle school had a zero tolerance policy, they considered that drugs.
Wow.
And,
they were your personal stash of no-dose pills? You wasn't flipping them? They were yours?
No, it was something that I had come across meddling at the house, being nosy, and I had brought it to school, showing it off. And they expelled me. I went to alternative school, actually I skipped school with some of the other kids. There, I went to one of the girls' homes. Her mother came home, she was not happy, and she called the police on us. And so I got sent to facilities. I got admitted to have a 30-day evaluation. And that was the first time, you always think about sleepovers and stuff, but you think about being that young and, you know, it's normal to sleep at somebody else's house, but this is completely different. This isn't a sleepover. This is, you're in a facility with strangers, and I couldn't even call my mother without the permission and supervision of some random staff person. And it was completely different being in a facility, and it really marked me, you know, being 12 years old and experiencing that life and being trapped in that way.
Now, I would imagine, you know, what you're saying, that the people that the school you went to was very aggressive and not very, like, you know, kind to you. When you go to a facility, what was the treatment like at such a young age when you went in?
Oh gosh, like it's worse. Like when I tell you, you had to fight every single day to just survive. And I was very small. I was like 98 pounds, 5'1". So I was one of the smaller girls there, and I was constantly having to fight to prove, you know, number one, you're not going to bully me. You're not going to continue to mistreat me. And you just had that reaction. And so I can remember I spent a total of about 2 years in facilities, and it was constantly a fight, constantly trying to survive. And now that I look back, I can see that all of us were dealing with anger in a very unhealthy way. The anger that comes with being trapped, with feeling that you're not heard, and being in a facility where every single day your basic human rights are denied, you're dehumanized. You have to beg for toilet paper and soap. And just those things, all the anger that you harbor from that, and we didn't know how to translate that. And so there we were, just fighting every single day, and it was hard.
Now, a lot of times they say people who get bullied or mistreated in common situations, or on a regular basis rather, they become aggressors themselves. So did any of this behavior ever become part of who you were, and you became the bully towards other people that you came encounter with?
I wouldn't have called myself a bully. But you know, at some point when I was younger, you know, you get fed up. You get tired of constantly having to throw a pity party for yourself because you're different, because you don't fit in. And so I just started developing this chip on the shoulder where I didn't care if I fit in. I didn't want to fit in. I didn't want friends. I didn't want to be the teacher's pet either. So I walked around with this chip on my shoulder and just kind of you know, sunk into myself and said to myself, I don't want to be around you. I don't want to be your friend. So I wouldn't say I was a bully. I just started to be standoffish.
Got a little tough. Okay, so you get out of the facility, you try to resume regular life, I'd imagine. So at this point, are you done with high school?
Well, in the facility they actually have classes, but you know, it's completely different. They hand you a syllabus and expect you to work your way through it and just pretty much figure it out. If you wanted to do the work, you could. They weren't necessarily trying to force you to do it. They just wanted you to sit there in the classroom and be quiet, basically. So I came out of the facility and I spent a little time in high school, but then, I mean, I didn't want the structure of the learning environment. So I started skipping school again. And it wasn't long before I ran away from home.
Okay, so when you run away from home, how long is it from that point till you meet Cutthroat?
So when I ran away from home, I had ran with some girls that I had met from the facility. And I was not really running away from something that was at my home. I had a good home life, but I was actually running toward a situation where, you know, I felt that I could be grown. I could do things that I wanted to do. I didn't have to live with structure. And more importantly, I was around people who I felt accepted me as I was. I didn't have to fight to belong or to fit in. And so there I was, and when I met Cutthroat, I had been raped by a man for the first time. He had kept me in a room for 2 days, and I had never experienced anything like that. When, I don't know how many survivors are in here, but when you're assaulted in that way, it just strips you of everything that you thought you knew about having power over your body, having a say-so over what happens with you. And that just introduced me to a whole different kind of anger, but a suppressed anger. And, you know, when I met him, I felt, well, this man, here's a protector. Here's somebody that, you know, he's listening to me. He cares about how I feel. There were so many men before, they just wanted me for my body. They just wanted what they wanted from me, but he's listening to me. He must want me for who I am. He accepts me. And I was vulnerable. I didn't see myself as being vulnerable, but I was. And it was very, very quickly, within the space of a week, that he had convinced me that it was completely normal for me to go out and meet men and bring him back the money.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, do you feel like sometimes people who have a predatory nature, they know who they're talking to. They know who they're it's almost like they can sense it. So you think he sensed that about you and your surroundings?
Absolutely. He was an adult. He was in his mid-20s. And, it was obvious that, I was desperate. I was a runaway. That was his first big indicator. I was staying with other people, had, needed shelter, had needed food. I didn't have a job. I couldn't have a job on the run the way that I was. So there were several things that he picked up on. And I definitely think that predatory men pick up on these things, and young girls especially, and they know that by nature young girls are vulnerable. I can't tell you how many men I had heard say that they like them young because they're trainable. And it's sick, but it is the way it is. And it needs to change, but that's definitely something that contributed to me being in that situation.
Okay, now to anybody who's listening to this story, like they're watching a movie, like, oh girl, you should have ran out of there. People don't understand, if they haven't been in that scenario, that it's not always as easy as just picking up and going. So if you could paint the picture as to when you started to notice these nuances of difference in his personality and the way he treated you and the things that he was requesting of you, what kept you there as opposed to just running off like some people feel like it's just easy enough to do?
So when I met Cut, and I had got it in my mind that this man wanted me, and I was already in a place where I was desperate to feel accepted, desperate to feel that I belonged somewhere. And when I felt that I had found that with him, there was nothing that he could have told me to do that I would have told him no. All I wanted was for him to continue to want me. I wanted it so badly. And in my mind, this was my boyfriend. We were in a relationship. It would take years before I understood, no, I was being trafficked, I was being taken advantage of. In my mind, I was just doing what I needed to do for the relationship. So when things started taking a turn, when he started calling me out of my name, when he started having lectures, walking around the room with a gun, I thought, oh, well, this is just a bad day. I didn't do good, or I made him mad, and I just need to be better. And every time that I would go out of the room and I would come back with this money, and I would just be thinking, this is going to be the time that everything is going to be fine, and he's going to be so happy because of what I'm bringing to the table. But it was never good enough. And, you slowly start feeling like it's just the life being sucked out of you, because your best is never good enough, but you still stay because you always think it's going to be. And then you really don't think that there is better for you. You don't think you have other options.
So the logic is you're thinking the money pacifies the beast and he'll be happy. Because from what I understand, I was listening to one interview you did, he wanted you to purchase a truck. He just pictures himself having some fancy truck and you was the person that was going to get it for him. Were you the only one that he had under his wing?
I have no idea. I don't know if I was. I know that, it was a very short amount of time that I was with him. In his obituary, it had mentioned that he had a fiance. I didn't know anything about that. So you can only imagine what else I didn't know.
So whatever happened to Cutthroat?
He was actually killed 8 months after I was arrested.
Before you was actually sentenced?
Yes, he was killed 5 months before I was sentenced.
Got you. So this is around 2000?
No, a year and 5 months, I'm sorry.
Okay, it's like 2005-ish? Okay, so let's roll into 2004. You're taking a trip to Tennessee, right? And you just wanted to change the scenery. What put you in the position that got you where we are now?
Well, I was in Tennessee.
Okay.
I was already in Tennessee. I was raised Army base there in Tennessee. I had actually ran to Nashville,
okay,
which was a bigger city in Tennessee. And like I said, I wanted to be around people where I could do things that I felt that they treated me like I was an adult, even though I wasn't. And at that time, that's what I wanted. My mother at home, There was structure. I had to go to school. I had to go to church. And I had already got a taste of life on the streets where I didn't have to do any of that. And that's what I was running toward.
So in 2004, you're 16, right?
Right, 2004 I was 16.
So what is your perspective of men? If you could rewind and think back who you were back in 2016, how did you feel about men? Because it seems like most of the interactions that you probably had at that point were just never the most favorable situations to be in. So like, you know, did you have a hard, callous look at the world at that point, or what?
No, and you know, this is the part that, you know, when I speak a lot about what actually contributed to me being in that situation with Cut, and people say, how did he get you to do those things within the space of 2 weeks? And it's because the groundwork had already been laid for him. The women that I was staying around, they were older women in their mid-20s, and they had started injecting me with this worldview that it was normal to expect money from men in exchange for conversation, in exchange for my time. There was this saying in the house that I was living in that you couldn't have sex unless you could pay a bill. And so there was this commodification of my body that had come to be normal to me. And when I met him, it didn't seem like that big of a leap for me to do those things, to have, you know, a sugar daddy, to have somebody that was, you know, giving me this money in exchange for my attention and for my time, and bringing it back to the man that I thought I loved. So a lot of people don't get that.
Understandable. So he introduces you to the gentleman that you ended up killing. Am I correct?
Well, he was too lazy for that. He never even left the room. He just sent me out and wouldn't let me come back in until I came back with money.
Got you.
So I actually went out walking on the street, and this man picked me up from the street.
Okay, now some stuff we will leave for the book because, you know, there's a lot of pages in it, and we want y'all to be sure you pick it up. It's called Free Cyntoia, and they'll be having copies assigned in the back. So we'll skip the middle part a little bit. The act of murder. Most people in this room will never know what that feels like. When the gun goes off and the flash happens and you realize what you've done. Cyntoia, what's running through your mind at that moment?
You know, I can remember standing there in that room, and just 2 weeks prior to that, I was on the phone with my mother. I would call her from time to time from blocked numbers, and she would always beg me to come home. And even though it was hard and I could see that I was in over my head, I never really wanted to accept that, you know, I was just a child and that I couldn't live life on my own the way that I wanted to. And so I can remember when I was standing there in the room with him, like that conversation, just, it came back to me, and it was like, wow, like I'm way over my head at this point. And the best that I can describe it is that my memory, you know, of everything that had led up to that, everything that happened during that night, everything that I had ever thought about life was just scattered around the room. And it would take me years to just really pick up those pieces and put it all together. It took many, many years.
Now, when something that extreme and traumatizing happens to one, who do you pick up and call? Like, who can handle that type of information in a non-judgy, but yet I want to help you kind of way, to help you, I don't know, get out of there or put you in a better space than you was in?
I mean, you don't even think like that. Like, you know, who's gonna help me with this? Like, you know, I just thought, I gotta get out of here. And I gotta get back to Cut because it's getting late. As twisted as that was, I just knew I was more scared of what was gonna happen if I came back too late or if I came back empty-handed to him, because that was the headspace that I was in. And he was the one that I went to. He was the one that I told. I can remember coming to the room and just telling him, I think I may have killed someone.
And what was his response?
He thought I was lying.
Really?
Yeah.
So at what point did he realize, no, this is for real, and y'all gotta think of something to do before the walls start closing in?
Well, I mean, really, you know, within the space of 24 hours, I was arrested. So I can remember seeing it on the news, because to be honest with you, I wasn't even sure what had happened, like in that moment. I remember standing there and it's like, oh wow, he's gonna be so mad that I shot this gun. Like, you know what I mean? In his house. As crazy as that is, that was my thought. And I remember running to get out of there and going down the steps, and I could hear him like he was snoring. And I was like, wow, like he just slept through that.
Cut was in the house when it happened?
No, the man that I shot.
Oh, the man that shot. So after you shot him, he was still snoring?
Yeah, I don't know if that was just a response. I don't know what
it never plays out how you think it does in the movies, right?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
No.
So from that situation, you get arrested.
Yeah.
And from 2004 to 2006, you were on trial. Now, when you were incarcerated, did you think, did you think that they was gonna see your side of the story and it would pretty much be an easy in, an easy out?
I mean, yeah, I did. I mean, you think, when you're in that situation, I'm like, well, I know what happened in that moment, and I know that I felt that I was defending myself. Why wouldn't they see it the same way? And so when they're like, well, no, that's not what's going to happen. You're going to be charged with felony murder, and we believe this happened. And it's like, well, why is nobody listening to me? Like, I was there. I know what happened. And you expect, you're always taught like the police they're gonna help you. They're here to help you. They're here to serve you, to protect you. And going through that experience, like, that's the opposite of what happened.
You clearly felt like you was a victim going in, telling your story, right?
I felt that it was justified. I felt that it was self-defense. Right. That's what I had always been taught. So to have someone from law enforcement tell me that I was actually being charged, like, it just completely just threw me for a loop.
Gotcha. Now your parents, how do they react to the news that you're in this level of trouble?
My mom was just devastated. I remember, it really did break her heart. It really did.
And, you get tried as an adult, and in 2006 you were sentenced, correct? And they gave you life. Did you think it was going to be that extreme? Did you think it would have been, I don't know? Because I've seen people get in and out for way less.
Yeah, I didn't. To be honest with you, I thought that the most that the jury would come back with was second-degree murder. So I thought I was going to be doing 15 years, sentenced to 15 years. So when they told me that I was convicted of first-degree murder like that, I mean, it was a shock. I knew that was the worst that could happen, that it was a possibility, but I didn't believe that it would.
So once you go in and start serving what you believe is the first day of the rest of your life in this new, colder, darker environment, what do you do to mentally prepare yourself for what your life is about to be from that day on?
I started preparing my appeal. I was not about to accept that I was going to serve the rest of my life in prison, period. So, I started preparing my appeal, and I started trying to figure out how I was going to find some type of life worth living there in the prison. And that would take several years for me to figure out. I struggled at first, like I wrote in the book. But I started taking classes through a college and just started really focusing on pushing through each day and just trying to be my best self.
Now, I would imagine going into the system as a near adult, because you did the crime when you were 16, 18 when you're sentenced, right? Different experience at 18 than it was when you were 12, correct? And high profile case. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people knew who you were coming in. Do you think that helped your stay, or did that make it a little bit more difficult to have whatever level of normalcy you can have in that environment?
So when I first started going through the court system at the age of 16, it was completely different. Just the whole proceedings from when I was 12. I can remember the DA just seemed to have this vendetta against me. I don't remember ever even realizing who the DA was in the courtroom when I went to juvenile court. It was just another guy there in the courtroom. But this time, he seemed to think of me as the worst person on the planet.
So the same guy who you used to see, who was there when you was 12, is the same guy you saw as
No.
Oh, different guy. Okay.
Yeah. So the experience just from that alone, it was like, wow, this is a completely different ball game. So it was a heavy experience on me. I knew that, this was different. This was the difference between me spending 3 years in prison or 3 years in a juvenile facility and me potentially spending the rest of my life in prison. And so all that just really weighed on me. And it was hard. So when I first got convicted, the media coverage, it wasn't positive, at all. I was being called a teen prostitute in the news because the whole narrative about trafficking was completely different. So I can remember seeing on the news TV, from the window on my cell and hearing the DA talk to reporters about me saying, that I was dangerous and I was this horrible individual and that the community needed to be protected far more than anything that could be done for me. He was just so ready to just write me off. And that was difficult starting out. And it really affected my self-esteem, which is already nothing to begin with.
Well, there's a common a thing I hear people say a lot. You do the time, you don't let the time do you. So while you were there, you did put your time to good use. You got your multiple degrees while you were there. How long did it take you to even get into the mindset to even want to focus and try to better yourself from behind bars? Because some people just give up. Yeah. And that's when your spirit really starts to sink,
Yeah, so when I first got sentenced, my attorney had come to visit me and he had sat down with me and he said, when you go to prison, you have two options. You can go there and you can pretty much give up. You can start doing drugs there in the prison. You can fight. You can just do whatever you feel. Or you can enroll in every single class that you can. Take everything that you can and really fight to better yourself. And that's pretty much going to be your only shot if you ever want to get clemency. And that was right after I had got convicted. So when I was tired of seeing that I was disappointing my family, I was tired of feeling that, I was disappointed in myself, that I wanted better for myself. I said, you know what, I don't know what it looks like, but I'm going to do what he said. I'm going to get in all these classes and I'm going to fight to better myself.
Well, and for you to even galvanize your inner power to want to do those things, there was still always a light that's in you, and it's always been in you.
Yeah.
Even when you was a small child. So being locked up, how long did it take for you to even, do something as simple as laugh at something that you found funny, or even smile? Because some people go in there and they just, they give up because everything is dark all around them. What was the first thing that put a smile on your face when you were locked up?
I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that it had something to do with my family coming to visit. My mother was there for me from the very beginning. Even though I spent all that time running away from home, she was the one who was there when all the people that I was running out to in the streets, they were nowhere to be found. But she was there. So in that early time, those smiles, they definitely came from visiting with her.
Got you. Are you and your family tighter now since you've been released than you were before you went in?
Oh, yeah. We are.
That's awesome. Thanksgiving, the whole nine that's happening this year?
Well, we'll see.
Whose house? Have y'all planned it out? You and the hubs?
We don't know whose house yet, but there's definitely going to be a meal. There's definitely going to be family. So.
Who's cooking it?
Not me.
Will there be ramen involved?
Will there be what?
Ramen?
If I cook, there would be.
But we're jumping ahead a little bit, right? So, your story starts getting out there in social media. 5 minutes? All right, cool, we got to so fast. So the story starts getting out there in social media. All types of celebs are sharing your story. The Kardashians, the Jay-Z's of the world. Did you even know that people were advocating for you at any level on the other side of the wall? Like, did any of that word get back to you?
Yeah, I had heard, from people outside, from my husband, from my attorneys, but I was getting letters from people all over the world, and it was incredible. Like, people who had never met me, who were just moved to pray for me and to let me know, to send me these words of encouragement. And it was beautiful. It was really beautiful to see the way that God had touched the hearts of people to really just stand up like that.
And there was one letter that definitely caught your eye more so than the others. You know, the style that it was written and delivered with the burnt edges. Then, you know, the gentleman is sitting in the audience, your husband, Jay Long. What was it about that just caught your attention more so than anybody else that was trying to contact you?
Yeah. So he actually wrote me long before all those other letters had come in, which I would get letters sometimes from people, but this was January 2017. All of my appeals had been denied at this point, and you know, clemency was the only opportunity. It was a very, very slim chance of me ever receiving clemency. And you know, he wrote me this letter, and it stuck out. I can't explain it other than to say that, you know, that was the Holy Spirit speaking through him, because he told me that God is bigger than any sentence, any judge, any jury, and that people were gonna start learning about my story, and they were going to come together and pray, and God was going to turn my sentence around. And it was so prophetic. You know, of course I didn't know that until after the fact,
right.
Until I was sitting there looking back at old letters, and it was like, wow, like this is almost scary. So it just stuck out to me, and we started writing and talking on the phone all the time. He was really there for me in those moments where, you know, it got really dark at times, because it was like, wow, like I've done 15 years almost, and I can't imagine spending the rest of my life in this place. And it looks like they're trying to keep me. And he would always tell me, you know, don't limit God, and don't believe what man says. You believe what the Lord told you. And
Amen.
yeah, just really just helped me to rebuild my faith, to build a relationship with Jesus, which I had never had a relationship before. I had religion, but not a relationship. And I mean, it completely changed my life. Here I am. You know, he listened.
Well, for the people who love romance out there, do you still have the letters?
I do.
Do you still have her letters? That's what's up. Now, the things that you've gone throughout your life, the series of events, in a lot of ways were sacrifices. And those sacrifices have now brought you to Clark Atlanta University, where you have a story to tell that has the potential to help millions of people out there. Considering everything you've gone through, would you do it all again?
Would I do what all again?
Would you repeat all the events? Would you repeat all of your events of your life story just to be in the position that you're in now? Because if you never got in trouble, you don't have the story to tell that helps people. But you've lived through it, so you know what the outcome is. But would you have the fortitude to do it all again if you had to, or would you make a change?
What I'll say is that what was meant for my bad, God turned for my good. And I think that's my answer. So.
Well, there it is. Couldn't have said it better than that. That's a great place to cap it. Cyntoia Brown, thank you so much. Your energy, your kindness, your resilience, it just bleeds through. And I feel like there's a lot of people that are completely blown away by what you had to say today. And I gotta send a big shout out to the Book Boutique, which they are in the back, and they have books, and you're gonna be signing autographs, correct?
Yeah.
Cool. So if you had to sell people on why they should pick up the book in a minute or less, what would you say?
I would say that there is something for everybody in this book. If you're interested in learning, the real story about going through the justice system, everything that led up to that, it impacts everybody. If you need an example of that, you should read this book about trafficking. It's affecting so many young girls, and what you don't know is the things that you can be encouraging could be actually contributing to that. I encourage you to read that book. If you've lost faith, if you feel that somebody may not be listening to you, if you feel that God doesn't see you, I encourage you to read this book, because I was in that place too, and he showed me. So there's literally something for everyone, and I hope that you'll share it. Whenever you finish reading the book, share it with someone else.
Now, for the lazy people, will there be an audiobook version?
There is an audiobook, and I actually got to read that.
That's what's up. It's always so much cooler when people read their own stories. I got Mike Tyson's audiobook. It's not him. Wildly disappointed. Well, thank y'all very much for coming out this afternoon, man. Feel free to hit the back. Cyntoia will be there. Thank you so much. Make some noise one time for Cyntoia Brown-Long.
As many got emotional, we got to understand who she was as Miss Brown. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Again, you are here with Monee's mic.